Hi, club officers. My name is Claire Ostrander, and I'm the Director of Student Involvement and Leadership Development. You're about to watch a training about Title IX on campus and how it might impact you in your role as a club officer. So you're probably familiar with Title IX in other areas of campus life, but this training is going to go over some details and some information about how Title IX might impact you as a club officer. So you'll learn a little bit about resources on campus and how you might be able to report things that might happen. This is important because as a club officer, club members might come to you as the leadership of their organization, and you'll have some information and some tools to know what next steps you might need to take. So hopefully you'll learn something, and please note that there's many resources if you have questions following this training. Thank you.
Our policy is that we use affirmative consent as a definition of consent, meaning that we expect people to consent, it could be verbally, but it could be like gestures or something in an affirmative way to indicate that sort of passivity and not, like the absence of a no does not mean it's consent, that there has to be the affirmative. Do you think people know that that's part of our consent definition?
No. I didn't know that we had consent definition.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Okay, so with that said, did any of you know we had that as a, okay.
Affirmative consent is the standard that we use in our community. It's an expectation that individuals who are going to engage in sexual activity will receive some sort of affirmative word or action in response to the request for that activity. The actual definition is outlined in our sexual violence policy, and it is stated as, consent is an understandable exchange of affirmative words or actions which indicate a willingness by all parties to participate in mutually agreed upon sexual activity. Consent must be informed, freely, and actively given. It is the responsibility of the initiator to obtain clear and affirmative responses at each stage of sexual involvement.
This is like realizing that if you're intoxicated, you can't consent, and like if you're like asleep, you can't consent. And I think that I know that they show a consent video at orientation. I don't know like the extent of what else I get into, but I think like more is better than what Sarah was saying.
So the sexual violence policy is a policy that applies to all members of our community and addresses behaviors that would be considered sexual violence, including sexual assault and rape as examples, but also all forms of sexual harassment and gender-based harassment. And this explicitly includes domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking as well. The policy not only describes what behaviors are prohibited, but also provides information about campus resources, options for reporting, and other really useful information for members of our community.
The medical amnesty policy focuses specifically on medical amnesty with regard to alcohol and drugs. However, it does tie in to Title IX and sexual assault. With regard to the policy itself, it's basically saying if there's a student who's under the influence of alcohol or drugs and it cannot care for themselves, needs medical attention, is having some negative experience related to this, that what we want above all is for them to seek help. And so as it applies to sexual assault, there are many times where a sexual assault may happen in a situation where someone has been using alcohol or drugs and they might be afraid to come forward and report that they were assaulted because they may be under the influence and they don't want to get in trouble for being on campus and being under the influence of alcohol. And so we really, again, above all else, we want someone to be able to be safe and come forward and make the report. So in terms of sexual assault, it hopefully encourages people to report and not be afraid of getting in trouble.
could identify some situations that might be considered sexual harassment when people are talking about situations that include making jokes about sexual orientation, people's bodies, any kind of joking or making harassing comments about sexual activity, making jokes or comments about expecting any kind of sexual activity, even in jest. So situations where the environment could feel toxic, shameful, could make someone in the situation feel uncomfortable about their sexuality, their bodies, the expectation of any sexual activity, and it could be distressing and feel like a harassing environment for anybody in the group.
Like, you know, if you're all like friends within the club, or you all feel like you're friends within the club, and I feel like if somebody says something kind of off color, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that person just being that person, making a joke, and you don't really realize the fact that they said something that could be offensive to another person. I feel like it's kind of hard to draw the line between friends and we should do something type of thing.
Some of the scenarios that have been brought to student involvement usually involve comments or gestures or things that club officers or club members have seen at meetings or events. Oftentimes there might be things on social media or a meme or a video that might be shared with no harm meant, but the impact of it might make people feel like they're excluded or not able to fully participate. So comments and gestures that kind of in your private life might feel appropriate sometimes are not seen that way in a club setting. So students will come to us looking for ways to kind of digest it and debrief it and what they should do. So it's really important for clubs to be aware of kind of how that can be seen. So those scenarios come up to student involvement often.
I had to find a way to address it respectfully, but also, you know, firmly, like, hey, this is something that's not, it's offensive to me and it's harmful to me and people like me. And it's a really hard thing to do because they're older than me, they were a club officer, it was an uncomfortable situation, and it's really hard to find a way to handle that.
So what I would advise student leaders if something were to happen at a club meeting and they've noticed body language changing or that students are uncomfortable with something that's been said or something that they've seen or something that's happened, you really need to assess your ability to manage it. So if it is something that you feel comfortable and confident in addressing with the group and you feel it's the appropriate place to kind of foster a conversation, that's okay. But also be aware that you want to make sure you diffuse or de-escalate the situation if it's going to potentially get more aggressive. And so utilize resources, whether it's your club advisor or if you're on campus and can call someone else in to be there. Also, other options that you have is really to address the situation privately with both parties involved. So you would want to make sure that the person that might have said or done or showed something is aware that others may have been uncomfortable and why. But also the people that you might have noticed or might have disclosed to you that they're uncomfortable, you want to make sure that you kind of debrief with them and see how they are. It's also important to make sure, depending on the situation, that you do report it if necessary to the proper office, whether it's campus police, the dean of students, student involvement, to make sure that we can follow up as well. And in the end, you want to make sure that you have a way to move forward from the situation. So even after another resolution might have happened, to make sure that the club as a whole feels that there is a way for them to move forward and be productive at future meetings and events.
I feel like I feel pretty prepared, but again, until you're in the actual situation, it's hard to determine how you're going to react in general, so.
Or like you might not even realize that you're in that type of situation until like after the fact. Like in my situation, I didn't hear it, but like after the club meeting, like it went over my head until somebody else was like, hey, this person said this, and like, oh no, type of thing. But yeah, I think just being like more like aware like of what's going on and, you know, just kind of having like your club officer ear and your friend ear on at the same time in a way. I think that would be more beneficial.
I definitely think that you have to like talk to them like not in front of everyone because you don't want to call them out. But I also think an important part of that is to talk to the person or people who were affected by it. Like they said that their member like never came back after that, and I think that's something that we're trying to focus so much on the person who said it and like how to like fix that, but also we didn't think about the people who were affected by it. I think being able to talk to them, some sort of like just saying, okay, we're gonna take care of this, like we don't want you to feel uncomfortable, like kind of having that sort of conversation with them just so they know that they're like welcome and things like this won't happen again if you take care of it. But like sweeping it under the rug is kind of gonna make them feel more uncomfortable and like, oh, like they don't really care about like how I feel, so I'm just not gonna come back.
Like I felt like when I had to deal with the situation at that event, I took the steps I needed to. You know, I reached out to my club advisor, I reached out to my department chair, and I said, this is happening and I don't know what to do. And they said, okay, this is what you need to do, and this is what you can do, and this is what you can't do, and unfortunately this is how it is. So I feel like I dealt with it the best way that I could, and they made sure to tell me that. But I feel like the end result wasn't right, and that wasn't in my control.
So there's a few things that we do in our office. Whether we hear about it from a club officer or otherwise, one of the first things that we do is make sure that a student understands the process and the resources available. So if a student were to come to us with a concern that something has happened, the first thing that we need to do is make sure that they understand that by talking to us, there are certain things that we cannot hold confidential. So before they speak, we make sure that they understand the confidential reporting options on campus. If they choose to continue speaking with us, then really what we want to do is make sure that we follow the proper process. If it's something that needs to be reported through the Dean of Students office, we definitely refer them to the Dean of Students or campus police or other resources. But also beyond the protocol for things associated with Title IX, we want to make sure that the dynamic in a club can be positive moving forward. So whether it is assisting with mediation with club members or club leaders, or providing some trainings having to do with conflict management or effective communication, we can work with clubs on finding ways to remedy some of the behaviors that have happened to help them move forward in a positive way.
Resources at Framingham State include the staff at the health center and the counseling center, the professional clinicians here who can meet with any student who has been a victim of assault or is concerned about someone, has witnessed something, or has been part of an assault. Other resources on campus include campus ministry, who also has the ability to meet with students and talk with them confidentially. Student services resources, the Dean of Students, University Police, Residence Life, the RAs, many other staff and faculty can be resources for students. They can be supportive and help them figure out where they might want to go or who they might want to talk to.
We all have advisors for a reason. I know a lot of times I forget that I can go to my advisor for anything if I am having an issue, if I don't want to confront the person directly. Having the advisor there as a third party, kind of able to mediate the conversation, I think is definitely an important thing to remember.
I also would say Chantal Washington, in the Center for Police Excellence, she did a training with one of the clubs on Island about having different difficult conversations, and that was really helpful. And I think that a lot of this can get a lot of this is what they talk about in the CIE and a lot of the discussions there. So I think she's a great resource, and whoever is takes over for Sean Wilson, I'm sure too. I think also just anyone that you're comfortable talking with on campus, if you have a professor that you're close with, I know they all go through different trainings and things like that. So I think just being able to talk to anyone is helpful.